I'm going to try a strategy that I hope will work and keep things interesting and not be too repetitive. Now, I'm from Texas, and in Texas, we know a little bit about Brazil. We know about caipirinhas. We know about Brazilian steakhouses. So today, I want to be your personal chiaroscuro waiter and serve you a variety of dishes that I hope will be interesting and a little bit different. Now, in a real restaurant, you would have these cute little cards, red and green, that like tell the waiter to stop or to keep on going. We won't be able to do that in this virtual format, but I will try and keep things moving along so that you won't need that red card. And one quick disclaimer before we get any farther. Unlike many of the preceding speakers, I am not a scientist. I am not a neuromarketing researcher. Rather, I am an entrepreneur, a business person, and an author. Now, to begin with, I'd like you to do one small thing for me. You can take your finger and simply tap the back of your other hand, just one little tap, that's all. And so remember that for later, we'll get back to that. Now, I've been writing about neuromarketing since about 2004. And over the years, that led to my book, Brainfluence, which has been translated into Portuguese. I hope it's still available in that format, and about 10 other languages. My most recent book is Friction. Now, in marketing, we have a trust problem. About 10 years ago, a survey of CEOs found that 90% trusted their chief financial officer to be fully competent to do his or her job, and about the same number for their CIOs. But when it came to their chief marketing officers, only 20% were that confident. That means 4 out of 5 of those CEOs surveyed weren't too sure about their marketing person. A few years later, another survey showed that 70% of their CEOs had lost trust in marketing. Even more recently, Harvard Business Review posted an article about why chief marketing officers have such short times in their jobs. Now, you might ask why this is, and I think it's because most marketing money is wasted. We know that a vast percentage of new products fail. We know that emails get terrible response rates. And often marketers deal with that problem by sending out even more emails, further depressing the response rates. There's probably no better indicator of marketing waste than e-commerce abandoned shopping carts. One estimate puts the annual number at $4.6 trillion compared to actual sales of about $2 trillion. That's a huge amount of waste. Think of all the money that went into pay-per-click ads, social media, content marketing, web design, everything else that attracted people to the website, got them to shop around, actually put stuff in their shopping cart, but then failed to get them across the finish line. Now, I could go on with the depressing statistics. You may well have some depressing statistics of your own, but I think what it's clear that we need is a revolution. And fortunately, we have one. For thousands of years, people thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. And then Galileo and Copernicus came along and showed that we weren't even the center of our own little solar system. Similarly, for thousands of years, people thought that the conscious mind was the center of human behavior. And as John Bard from Yale so eloquently puts it, just as Galileo moved the Earth from the center of the universe, so too does the current scientific revolution move the conscious mind from the center of human behavior. So this begs a question. Why, after thousands and thousands of academic papers, millions, literally millions of books being sold, 2 Nobel Prizes, why are marketers still focused on logic and reason to persuade their customers? It's really important that we all remember who's in charge, and it is not Mr. Spock. Now, when we think about the brain, Gerald Zaltman of Harvard estimates that only 5% of our decision-making processes are conscious and that 95% are non-conscious. And so this begs the question, how do we know what's going on in that vast non-conscious area of activity? And one answer, as you might guess from this conference at least, is neuromarketing, also called consumer neuroscience. Now, this takes a lot of forms. Over the years, it's included EEG, it's included biometrics, it's included facial coding, implicit testing, a whole variety of tools. And I'm not going to go into those because you've already heard about at least a few of those techniques, but I do want to leave you with one thought from Temple University, major US research university, that a few years ago conducted a major study of neuromarketing techniques. Their results were mixed across techniques, but their most important conclusion was that they found that neurophysiological measures could predict ad success. To me, this was a huge step in legitimizing the field of neuromarketing and should lead to additional academic work in the coming years. Now, one other thing I want to address very briefly is the question of business to consumer or business to business. Usually we think of neuromarketing in terms of B2C, but it has a role in B2B as well. Because I think the biggest lie in B2B marketing is that those customers make rational decisions. If you look at the B2B literature, you will find all kinds of processes for how B2B customers decide, buying journeys and whatnot. And these aren't necessarily wrong, but they overlook the point that B2B customers are human and they are subject to the same cognitive biases that all humans are. So what I want to do here in the next little bit is give you at least a few tools that will help you address that non-conscious decision-making process in your customer's mind. And it's important to use the right tool for the particular job. For example, if you're trying to improve how your brand is perceived, that's totally different than if you're trying to get the consumers to pay attention to your ad. If you're trying to increase conversion rates on your website, that's different than if you're trying to increase customer loyalty. So what I'm going to do here is our very first course is talk a little bit about what I see neuromarketing as in 2021. I see that neuromarketing falls on a couple of spectra. The first is neuroscience, or the hard tools of neuroscience on one end, and behavioral science on the other. And it isn't either or. I think it's a continuum. Similarly, we can use these tools to look at very specific problems. For instance, comparing how ad A versus ad B lights up a customer's brain, or trying to use these tools in a much more general sense. In other words, develop general concepts that we can apply across our marketing and sales efforts without having to evaluate each one using neuromarketing tools. And I'll give you one example of this, and that's eye tracking. This is commonly referred to as a tool of consumer neuroscience. It's included in many types of neuromarketing studies, but really, I would argue that it is not so much a neuroscience tool as a behavior tool. You are measuring how customers behave when they are exposed to your ad or product or whatever. And I'm not the only person to think this way. For years, the biggest player in this space was Nielsen Consumer Neuroscience. Back in 2019, they took their entire staff of neuroscientists and repurposed them, or at least additionally purposed them as trainers and consultants in behavioral science, because they saw the utility of this as well. Now, in 2020, they ran into some difficulties. When the pandemic hit, with their big global footprint of all these offices, they scaled back their neuromarketing staff tremendously, went from about 20 neuroscientists to 3 neuroscientists. But I don't believe that invalidates the concept of neuromarketing. I think that was really more a specific situation with their business and how they reacted to the problems from the pandemic. I see this trend toward applying behavioral science in many big brands. Think about Google, Walmart, big banking firms. All these companies now have behavioral science units. I've been lucky enough to talk to not one, but 2 of the global heads of behavioral science at Walmart. And they have a specific process for applying these tools. They will identify a problem or goal. And it isn't even the behavioral scientists that do this. Typically, it is people in marketing. Maybe they're trying to increase conversion on some part of their website. Maybe they're trying to change consumer behavior in their Sam's Club stores. Maybe human resources is trying to change an employee behavior in some way. In any case, first the problem is identified. Then they go to the literature and try and create a hypothesis for an intervention that will improve the situation. And once they have this, They don't go out and then develop, say, an expensive mobile app or something of that nature. Instead, they pilot it. They test it in as simple and cheap a way as possible. For instance, instead of developing a mobile app at a cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars, they will send one of their team members into a Sam's Club with a clipboard to try and sort of simulate what that mobile app might do for a customer, and then evaluate what did they learn. And from there, they can perhaps modify the process a little bit and try again. They can scale it up to the next level, perhaps create a very crude app that they can hand people on an iPad as they walk in or something like that. Or eventually they can scale it up and roll it out across all of their stores or all of their websites and such. Now, you might ask, how do we begin to apply these tools of behavioral science? And that's kind of beyond the scope of our talk here today, but I think we can hit a few high points. And we have to begin with Robert Cialdini, who invented the science of influence and the science of persuasion psychology back decades ago. He's famous for his originally 6, now 7 principles, things like social proof. When other people do something, you're more likely to do that thing. Reciprocation. If I do something for you, you're more likely to do something for me in return, and so on. I'm excited to say that he has a new version of his classic book, Influence, coming out just a little bit later this year. So that's something that we can all look forward to. Now, B.J. Fogg is a researcher at Stanford who's one of the pioneers in behavior design. And he's most well known for his Fogg behavior model. And he says you need 3 things to create or change a behavior. You have to have motivation. The person has to want to do the behavior or want the result of doing the behavior. There has to be ability. That translates into lack of difficulty or not too much effort to do. And then finally, there has to be a trigger, or as he now calls it, a prompt, something to get the ball rolling. Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner in this space, wrote his amazing book, Thinking Fast and Slow, which continues to influence people in practically every industry you can imagine. And one of his key insights was that we have 2 ways of thinking, system 1 and system 2. I'm sure you've already heard about that more than once, but we know that system 1 is that non-conscious, fast, intuitive, rule-based, low-effort decision-making process. And system 2 is that rational, logical, conscious, grind-through-it sort of thinking that he found our brains don't like to be in. If we have a choice, we will use the default system, system 1, for making a decision. We have the field of evolutionary psychology. Jeffrey Miller is one of the players in that space. He wrote an entire book called Spent on how our modern consumer behavior is driven by patterns that were laid down tens of thousands of years ago. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other researchers around the world who are constantly conducting studies and publishing research that in many cases we can apply to our marketing problems and our business problems. So how do we do that? Well, that brings up our next course. A few years ago, I created my own little framework called the persuasion slide. It's based on the children's playground toy or tool, the slide, and there's 4 elements in it. We'll go through those, but each element has a conscious and a non-conscious component so that as we think about our marketing and persuasion processes, we can remember to incorporate both conscious and non-conscious processes. Now, I'm using conscious and non-conscious as a shorthand. We could talk about rational and emotional, system 2 or system 1, an analytical, rational versus heuristic or rule-based. There are many ways to slice and dice this, but for shorthand, most of the time, I will talk about conscious and non-conscious, recognizing that these are not all exactly equivalent. So if you are marketing perfume, for example, or fragrances, you will mostly be at the non-conscious end of the spectrum. You don't see many perfume marketers talking about the exact amounts of essential oils in their fragrances, or how their product tested 83% better than some competitor's product. They use emotional imagery. They show you pictures of people that you would like to be, or perhaps like to be with. On the other hand, if you're selling industrial machinery, you're going to be pretty heavily at the conscious end of the spectrum. Yes, you may still use those non-conscious cues to exploit a cognitive bias here or there because B2B customers are human, but it's important to assure your potential buyers that your product will do all the things they need, that it will meet their specifications, it has appropriate guarantees, and so on. Now we think of Amazon as being a kind of conscious type of marketer. It's all facts and figures and text. But just in the visible part of a typical product page, we see a lot of non-conscious cues. We see social proof in a couple forms. We see number of reviews indicating a level of popularity for the product, and also the star ratings for the reviews indicating what those people thought about the product. We see free in multiple places on most product pages. Free was found by Dan Ariely to be a much more powerful motivator to our brain than the actual value of whatever the free thing is. We see free and our brain lights up. They use scarcity. If a product is in short supply, they will put in big color type the limited number that are left to encourage you to buy before you miss out. They hide much of the descriptive text, which not only serves to shorten up their rather long pages, but also there is research that shows that if you give people too much information, they may delay making any decision. They may say, oh, I need to think about this. Maybe I need to shop around. So that information is there for those people who really need it, but it is hidden for anybody else where it might simply slow down their decision making. And finally, just out of view, we see another Cialdini principle, authority. In this case, favorable commentary from best-selling authors and subject matter experts. Now, the next element in the slide is gravity. We know that gravity is why slides work in the real world. And in our framework, it represents your customers' motivations. This is their initial motivation, nothing that you provide. This is what they are coming to you with, their needs, their wants, their goals. And it's important to always focus on gravity. You should never ask people to do something for you because you're fighting gravity when you're doing that. And right now you're saying, well, I would never do that. How many times have you gone to a website and the very first thing you see is a stupid pop-up that's going to ask you to do a survey after you're done, and you have to figure out how to close this stupid thing so that you can get on with either buying something or learning more about the company or whatever you went to that website for. Instead, you should work with gravity. Show immediately how you are going to fit your customers' goals, their needs, their wants. Neil Patel is a digital marketing guy who is an expert in traffic generation. When you go to his website, immediately you are prompted, do you want more traffic? Now, if you're visiting his site, chances are you got there because you want more traffic. That's what he specializes in. And so he's immediately aligning with the gravity of the customers who are coming there. Same thing for Ann Hanley. She is a marketing and copywriting expert. She says, immediately assures the visitor, you are at the right place for ridiculously good marketing. Totally aligned with gravity. Now, we have conscious motivation and non-conscious motivation. If you ask somebody why they are buying a car, they would probably talk about, well, I need transportation. They would want to make sure that it fits everybody in their family, including the dog. They want to know about the resale value, the fuel economy. These are all conscious motivators, and they are important. If you're buying a car, it's a major purchase. But if this was the only motivation people had, everybody would be driving smart cars or 15-year-old expensive used cars. We know that's not the case. We know that there are many non-conscious motivators that people may not recognize themselves. They may not think that this is important, even though it may be. People may buy a car because they want their neighbors to view them as prosperous, as successful, as living a desirable lifestyle. They may think that this car will make them more attractive to other people. They may buy a car that signals something about them and what's important to them. They may pay a premium for an environmentally friendly car to show everybody else that, hey, this may not actually affect the environment in a real way, but I am showing you that this is something important to me. And of course, we have fantasy. The new Hummer EV from General Motors will cost well over $100,000. Most of their marketing shows it going through forests, through deserts, bouncing over boulders. I am willing to bet that not one of their customers out of 100 is going to risk getting a chip off the paint of their $100,000 vehicle by going on anything other than a paved road. But they know that if they did want to go on that desert trail, they could do it. The same thing applies to, say, a luxury watch. How many Rolex owners have ever taken their watch down to its 300-meter tested depth, or even 30 meters or 3 meters. Probably most are afraid to get it wet in the shower. But again, they know that this watch has that capability if they ever want to do it. So think about, what are your customers' motivations, both their conscious ones, those things that are important part of their decision-making process, but also their non-conscious ones. Now, the next element in the slide is the nudge. That's the when mom or dad gives the child a little push at the top of the slide to get them moving. And in our framework, it represents getting your customers' attention and getting them a little bit motivated. And it could take many forms. It could be an email, a pop-up ad, a search ad, a visible call to action, a phone call, a sales call, anything that gets the customer's attention and starts that motivation process. Now, Ramit Sethi is an internet marketer who was actually a student of BJ Fogg's at Stanford. So he understands a little bit about persuasion psychology and behavior design. When you go to his website, which is iwillteachyoutoberich.com. So clearly people are coming there who want to earn more money. That's what he does. He teaches people through courses and such how to make more money, how to be successful in their career or as an entrepreneur. And he has multiple nudges there. His objective is to get you to subscribe to his newsletter. He doesn't expect to sell you anything instantly, but he does want you to subscribe so that he can market to you and ultimately sell you one of his courses or something else. He has a little nudge suggesting that you subscribe, join 400,000 other subscribers who want to also earn more money or make more money. But his main nudge takes up the entire visible area of the page, and it's a very soft nudge. He doesn't say, give me your email address and I'll send you good stuff. He says, do you know your earning potential? I can tell you, just start here, click here. And it's a very gentle nudge, but it's also non-threatening. I'm willing to bet that 10 times as many people click this nudge as say, okay, I just want to subscribe to this. But by the time you get through this process, you will, at that point, be nudged. Okay, if you want to find out your earning potential now, I will send that to you. Please give me your email address. And just in case you don't respond to either of these nudges, there's also an exit intent pop-up that will say, hey, why don't you try that quiz to learn your earning potential? The important parts of the nudge must be seen, first of all, and it has to start that process, because a nudge that provides no motivation at all is an ineffective nudge. I'll give you one example. LinkedIn can nudge you by putting your picture in someone else's ad. Now you pretty much have to look at that. It's good at getting your attention because you see your picture in an unexpected part of the page. But in this case, they nudged me to follow Comcast Business, an internet service provider whose territory I'm not in. They didn't say they were going to send me great content. They didn't say they were going to give me discounts or do anything for me. So there was no motivation, and I ignored this nudge, as I'm sure 99.99% of the other people did. Now you can have non-conscious nudges too. This is a nudge to view a funny basketball video, but they don't show a basketball player falling backwards into the stands or doing something funny. They show an attractive woman, probably because their testing showed that this got more clicks to their basketball video. Now, they aren't saying we are going to show you pictures of attractive women, but non-consciously, people are saying, I'm going to watch this basketball video, but in the back of their mind, they're thinking, oh, wow, there's probably attractive women here too. So think about how you are nudging, prompting, triggering your customers. Are you doing it in a way that gets their attention? And are you adding that little bit of motivation to make sure that they move on to the next step in your process so they can complete that process? Now, the angle of the slide is obviously, in the real world, what gets kids to the bottom. If it's not a very steep slide, they don't go all the way down. If it's very steep, they go down very quickly. And it represents the motivation that you provide in our framework. These can be conscious motivators, things like your products or services, features, your benefits, discounts, your pricing, gifts that you may offer, anything that your customer is going to process consciously and say, okay, this will be something that solves my particular need. But you can use non-conscious motivators, emotional appeals, appeals based on psychology, appeals that exploit cognitive biases that all humans have. Usually, it's a good idea to incorporate both conscious and non-conscious motivators. Now, conscious things can be things like, how powerful your product is, how much money your product will save the customer, whether there's a money-back guarantee. You can use gifts and discounts. These are very common conscious motivators. Even Ramit does that as well. If you didn't respond to his other nudges, he says, okay, hey, I will give you these 4 valuable books that will teach you important skills if you give me your email address. So he does that. It's a very conscious sort of a motivator, but just in case you didn't respond to his others, he does it again. In the retail world, sales are an incredibly important nudge and motivator. In the US, at least, retailers typically send a weekly flyer to their customers, and it's full of this week's sale prices. A few years back, one major retailer decided to buck the trend, stop the insanity, because really it is sort of crazy. The list prices for their products at a typical, let's say, apparel retailer are set very high. Nobody buys at those prices, but every week, a huge portion of the inventory gets marked down 30, 40, 50%, and people come in and buy. This retailer with a new CEO said, well, let's stop doing this. Let us make things easy for our customers. We'll have everyday low prices. They will know that if they go into the store, they'll get the best price on any product that they see. They won't have to worry that, wow, next week it's going to be cheaper. Did this work? No, actually it didn't. Within a year, their sales had fallen so much that the company was on the verge of bankruptcy. What was happening was, without the discounts, there was no motivation. They were still nudging their customers with these weekly flyers, nice colored pictures of the products that were appropriate for that season, but they did not have that additional motivating factor of the sales that were going to expire in a few days. They fired that CEO, went back to all sales all the time, and at least for a period of years, managed to regain their equilibrium, at least until the pandemic hit and the retail apocalypse intensified. The problem is that using these kinds of tools, giving people free stuff, giving people discounts, giving free shipping, and so on, all of this costs money. It's expensive. Yes, you can increase motivation, but you're also reducing your profit potential. Non-conscious motivators are usually free because they may simply represent a change in imagery or in the advertising copy or headline, and they can even be more effective sometimes than these conscious motivators. And I'm talking about things like social proof, which we already alluded to. We saw Ramit Sethi. Hey, 400,000 people are subscribing to my newsletter right now, so surely it must be of some value. We see that all the time. Brands talk about how many customers they have, how many people, how popular their brand is, and so on. We're the number one product in our category. Authority is another one of Cialdini's 6 original principles. And when my book Friction was coming out, my publisher elected to bump a Nobel Prize winner, Richard Thaler's endorsement to the back cover in order to put the authority on authority, Robert Cialdini, on the front cover. Scarcity is another one of Cialdini's principles, and it includes things like urgency and fear of missing out. Brands in the travel space use this all the time. You go to any travel website, whether it's an airline or something like Expedia or Booking, you will see all these scarcity queues. There's only 2 rooms left at this price, only 2 seats on the airplane. This deal expires tomorrow. All of these things are telling you that you need to act right now. And these brands employ behavioral scientists. They use these techniques because they work. They test constantly. And if you see them using a technique, it's because it is causing their conversion rates to go up. You can even make your own scarcity if you have no scarcity problems with your product or your service. You can have an offer that expires at a specific time. You can have a fixed number of products available at a price that when they're gone, they're gone. You may offer more at that price at another point, but you can create these things. You can even use sort of soft scarcity cues like a limited supply or this program is filling up fast. A fear of missing out is a scarcity cue. People don't want to think they're missing out, and that's because Daniel Kahneman and other researchers have found that losses are more important or more significant to our brains than gains are. So if you can frame your benefit in terms of a loss, often that will work better than if you frame it in terms of a gain. For example, If you are trying to get people to attend your conference, you can talk about gain framing, learn new skills, meet your peers. These are all positive things that will happen if you attend that conference. But you could also use loss framing, things like you might lose sales if you don't attend the conference. Don't miss out. And these can be perhaps even greater triggers depending on the person and how you use them. But not everything relates to these major principles in persuasion psychology. This is a price, and this is a price. Those two prices look the same. In fact, if you are female, they are more or less the same. But if you are a male viewing those prices, that sale price in red is going to appear to be about twice as big of a discount, according to one study, than that same exact sale price printed in black. Another crazy study had people sample tomato soup. It was all the same soup, of course. Half of the subjects saw it with a sign using a simple typewriter font. The other half saw it with a sign with a slightly more elegant Lucinda font. That group thought that the soup tasted better on average, and they were twice as likely to say that they would buy that soup. Same exact soup, but a 2-time difference in willingness or intention to purchase. Now, I could go on and on with these, but it's important for you to not assume that because something worked for somebody else, you saw it in a magazine, you heard it at a conference like this, that it will work in your situation. There's an entire discipline called conversion optimization or conversion rate optimization that measures exactly how effective different types of changes to your pitch are, whether it is a different image, a different headline, different copy, or so on. Try different things. Use some of these very accessible, often very inexpensive tools to see what is going to work in your situation. So now it's time for our next course. Many years ago, I had a little specialty lock that was frozen. The key wouldn't turn, so I took it to a locksmith. He looked at it, grabbed a can of some stuff from under his counter, took it out, gave it a squirt, and lo and behold, the key turned. The lock began working perfectly. He wouldn't take payment for fixing my lock, but he did sell me a can of the stuff that I'd never seen or heard of before. Now, here's the weird thing, a weird coincidence. A week later, I was at a Formula One race outside Toronto, and what did I see in the pit garage next to one of these exotic machines but a can of the exact same stuff that locksmith had sold me? Now, you might be wondering what it was, but probably at least a few of you have guessed that it was WD-40, because we know we can fix anything with two things. If it moves and it's not supposed to, we duct tape it. If it doesn't move and it's supposed to, we WD-40 it. Now, in the physical world, mechanical problems tend to be pretty easy to solve. In the business world, not so easy. Wouldn't it be great if there was a magic spray like that locksmith sold me that would give you more loyal customers and more engaged team members? Well, bad news, there is no magic spray, but there is one strategy, a friction-based strategy that can give you those benefits and many more. And by friction, I'm talking about the final element in the persuasion slide. It is difficulty, both real and perceived. If you've ever seen a kid get stuck partway down a slide, it's because the slide isn't slippery enough. There's too much friction. And my simplest definition of friction is any unnecessary effort to perform a task. Any unnecessary effort to perform a task. And the fact is that even in 2021, friction is everywhere. Usually we don't see it. If we do see it, we ignore it. We say, oh, it just has to be that way. There's not a better way. We've always done it that way. That's it. I'll give you an example that I know you are familiar with. For most of my life, I thought taxis were an effort saver. They were easier, faster than taking a bus. They are much less effort than walking a long distance. They were friction reducers. And then Uber came along, and suddenly I and everybody else saw how much friction there was in that taxi process, from trying to hail one by the side of the street, waving your arm, to wondering, you've booked that ride for the airport, they're 2 minutes late. Now, where are they? Did they forget about you? Did they lose your request? Are you going to miss your flight? Or with Uber, you can simply look at the app and say, oh, they're right around the corner. I don't have to worry. to finally paying instead of having to fumble for your wallet and credit cards or cash and deal with bulky machines and mobile internet connections on their machine and so on. You just say goodbye, and it's all taken care of automatically. Currency exchange, no problem. It's all done. Now, if I have to take a conventional taxi, it seems like a pretty high friction experience to me. And here's an even more contemporary example. We're all doing a lot of virtual stuff these days, and one name has become synonymous with that virtual conferencing or virtual meeting. And in 2019, that most likely might have been, say, WebEx, the market leader, Skype, Google Hangouts. But as we know, in 2020, Zoom became, much like Google is for search, the default term for any kind of virtual conference or virtual conversation. And this is not a pandemic phenomenon, though. Years before, they were already accelerating past their competition. And of course, when the pandemic hit, that just kicked them into a much higher gear. They quadrupled their revenue in just the first few months. They added 100,000 new paying customers in the first few months. And why did they succeed when their better financed, bigger competitors didn't? And I think it relates to their mission statement, which is very simply make communications frictionless. Now, that itself is a low friction mission statement, but it provides perfect clarity to, say, an app developer. I'm going to add this feature. How is this going to affect our company's mission? Is it going to make it easier, or is it going to add complexity? And if it's going to make the process more frictionless, reduce friction, they'll do it. If not, maybe they don't do it, or at least they go to their boss and say, hey, how do we deal with this? I tried to find Cisco's mission statement, the parent company of WebEx. I looked on their website, couldn't find it. I used Google to search their website, still couldn't find it. Finally, on a third-party site, I found an old one, and it talks about shaping the future of the internet by creating unprecedented value for customers, employees, investors, ecosystem partners, whatever they are. Who knows? What does this mission statement even mean? This is a high-friction mission statement, provides no clarity to their team members as to what I'm doing, creating unprecedented value for all these different people. Who knows? So my promise to you in this next little section here is to give you a set of friction goggles, imaginary goggles, but you will be seeing more friction than you were before. So let's talk about the science of friction. And I assume we have a few dog people in our audience today. This was my little pup about 11 years ago. He's getting older now, lays around a lot. His favorite hobby is taking naps, but there's one thing that gets his attention, and that is food. So I decided to conduct a little experiment. This is a regular dog food bowl. This is a slow feeder bowl. It slows down dogs who gulp their food too quickly. This is a treat ball. Dogs have to roll it around and shake it and squeeze it to get the food pellets out. I decided to see how long it would take him to consume a meal in each condition. It took about half a minute in the regular bowl, about 5 times as long in the slow feeder, and in the treat ball, about 10 minutes. That's about 20 times more effort than the regular dog food bowl. Now, you might think that he would be aggravated by this, but in fact, no, we're still friends. The key takeaway from this is that in every single condition, his motivation was so high that he consumed 100% of the food. Did not matter how hard he had to work for it, he consumed 100%. Here's the bad news. Your customers are not dogs. If what you are asking them to do is any more difficult, any more effort than whatever their alternative is, they will most likely take that alternative because friction changes behavior. Friction changes behavior. This is based on the law of least effort. It goes back at least to the Middle Ages. More recently, Daniel Kahneman says that there is a law of least effort that applies to cognitive as well as physical exertion, and that people are fundamentally pretty lazy. I'll give you one example of this. The last international conference I was able to attend was on the lovely Dutch island of Texel. Beautiful hotel in sand dunes, all these walking paths. On this path, there was a little wood gate. It was not locked. It took almost no effort to push open. But despite that, many, if not most people, had decided to walk around the gate rather than exert the minimal effort of pushing it open. In fact, This phenomenon is so common, there's a name for it. These are called desire paths. When your customers find an easier way of doing whatever it is you wanted them to do. Like, did the designers of this roundabout really think people were going to walk around in a circular pattern? Of course not. Now, you can deal with this in a couple of ways. You can try and correct your customers' behavior and make sure they do it the way that you want them to. Or the way I recommend doing it is making their path even easier. Pave that path that they created to make it maximally easy. Now, BJ Fogg himself focuses of these three elements of his model on ability. In fact, he says, don't focus on motivating people to do stuff. Focus on increasing ability, making that thing easier to do. And in fact, Richard Thaler says very simply, if you want to encourage some activity, make it easy. This is pretty much what earned him his Nobel Prize. But it's amazing to me how many business leaders still have not internalized this and applied it to their customer experience, to their employee experience. So let's move on to our next course. Acquiring customers is important. New customers are great, but loyal customers are even better. These are your most valuable customers. They're your highest revenue customers. You don't have ongoing acquisition costs. They are more likely to recommend you to other customers. We all know how important that is. So these should be focused, you should be focused on building these loyal customers. But how do we define loyalty? We could talk about repeat purchases. We could talk about avoiding competitors, but I think that true loyalty can be tested. And if one brand that I am very loyal to is Amazon's Prime service. I make most of my online purchases through them. And a few years ago, in my home state of Texas, my loyalty was tested. They began charging sales tax for the state of Texas, where other e-commerce companies were not yet doing that. Now, I vowed that I would shop around. It'd be stupid to pay an extra 8%. When I look back a year later, my behavior had changed almost zero. Why? I was too loyal to Amazon. I trusted them more than I trusted other people with my credit card information. I trusted they would get it to me when they said they would get it to me versus someone else's delivery promise. It was simply too easy to keep doing business with them, clicking that one-click button. True loyalty is emotional. It's not rational, and it's unconscious the way mine was. Consciously, I said, I'm going to shop around. Unconsciously, I said, I'm going to keep doing business with Amazon. What drives true loyalty, research shows, is low friction. Gartner, the big market research company, did some amazing research on customer service interactions. They found that people who had a high effort interaction said they were 96% of those people said they would likely be disloyal to that brand. That's 10 times as high as those customers who had a low effort interaction. Similarly, 94% of the low effort customers said they would buy again. Only 4% of the high effort customers said they would buy again. And we know how important word of mouth is. People want ratings, they want reviews, they want to know what other people think. 88% of those high effort customers said they would say bad things about the brand compared to just 1% of the low effort customers. Let's recap those numbers. They're crazy. 94% of the customers who had a high effort experience said they would be disloyal. 4% said they would buy again. 88% said they would say bad things about the brand. This sounds pretty scary, right? Well, I have something that's even more scary. This effort is in your customer's head. There is not an absolute standard of effort where you can say, okay, now I am low effort. You can't even say my effort is better than my competitor's effort. They are comparing you to whatever they think low effort is. They're comparing you to Amazon, to Uber, or to something else that they find to be very easy. And if you are making them work harder, then you are high effort. Low friction experiences drive loyalty. So let's look at some real types of friction. Forms are friction. Customers hate forms. They hate paper forms, web forms, mobile forms. Doesn't matter. They hate them. However many steps there are in a process, usually the more steps, the more effort there is, the more friction there is in that process. If people have to read instructions, if whatever you want them to do isn't intuitive, if it isn't obvious, that is friction. If they're confused about what to do next, they're partway through your process and suddenly they have to pause and, okay, where do I go now? that is friction. And of course, as Gartner's research showed, any kind of high effort interaction, whether it's tech support, a return, customer support, a question, anything, that is friction. Strive for frictionless in every aspect of your business. I'm going to give you an example I've been using for a long time. I'm hoping that Staples has improved their processes by now, but I needed some ink for my printer. And I knew that Staples, I was an existing customer, I knew they would deliver it to me the next day for free. That's even faster than Amazon would do it. So I went to their website, dropped the product in my cart, found it very easily, went to check out, and I saw this horrendously long order form. I was not logged in, even though I was an existing customer. Furthermore, perhaps because they had coded the form that way, my browser would not autofill my login information for me. So at that point, I had a dilemma. Do I try and hunt down my login information for staples.com? Probably a high effort process with no guarantee of success. Do I do a password reset process, which always seems to take longer? Then, of course, I've got to reset it on other devices as well. Or do I check out as a guest using this horribly long form? I did none of those. I jumped in my car, went to Office Max. 30 minutes later, I was back in my office. The ink was in my printer, and my original Staples ink was still in my shopping cart, part of that $4.6 trillion in abandoned merchandise. Contrast that with Amazon, where they have taken almost all the friction out of their ordering process. You're always logged in when you go to Amazon.com. You have to reformat your hard drive to log out of Amazon. Back in 1997, when most companies were just trying to figure out what e-commerce was, Jeff Bezos was talking about frictionless shopping. The year after that, they patented one-click ordering. A lot of companies didn't think you could do that. Barnes & Noble, their chief competitor then, implemented a similar process on their site, and pretty soon they were in a big legal fight with Amazon. After a few years in court and millions of dollars in legal fees, Amazon won. Their patent was declared valid. Now, what did they get for all that time and those millions of dollars? Remember at the very beginning, that one little tap? That is the level of effort that they imposed on their competition. Barnes & Noble had to add an extra click. They added a confirm order button after their order now button. Doesn't seem like much effort. Doesn't seem like it'd be worth millions of dollars, does it? But there was one other smart guy at that same time. Steve Jobs was about to introduce Apple's new music store. He saw one-click ordering. Apple didn't try and work around the patent. They didn't try and fight it in court the way Barnes & Noble did. They paid Amazon $1 million so they could have that one tiny little click advantage over their competitors. And we know that worked out pretty well for Apple. And it's not just their ordering process, it is every part of their business. Years ago, Amazon identified what they called wrap rage. You know what I'm talking about, these horrible heat-sealed clamshell products made with plastic. You've got to cut your way into them with sharp implements like scissors or knives or machetes. If you don't stab yourself with a sharp implement, you're likely to stab yourself on a plastic shard. Amazon created frustration-free packaging. Very simple idea, simple cardboard boxes you can open with your bare hands, minimal risk of personal injury, better for the environment. People like the packaging. Here is the crazy thing. Not only do people like the packaging better, there was a huge reduction in negative feedback on the products packaged that way. People liked the products themselves better, even though they were the same products. Amazon even makes returns easy. If you sell physical products, you know returns are horrible things. But Amazon doesn't discourage returns. They make it easy. Even if you've destroyed your product's package, even if you don't know how to print a shipping label, you can take your mobile phone and your bare product to UPS. They will pack it up for you and return it to Amazon free of charge. Does this cost Amazon money? Yes, it's very expensive. But this is why in 2019, when everybody else was trying to cut into their market share, not only did their sales increase, their market share went up 10%. And when the pandemic hit, they just took off like crazy. They added 400,000 new jobs. Imagine that, almost 500,000 new jobs in a year to keep up with demand. As Jeff Bezos puts it, when you reduce friction, make something easy, people do more of it. And in their case, that has meant ordered a lot more stuff, watched more videos, listened to more music, done a lot of the things Amazon wants them to do. Google is another company that has been very cognizant of customer effort, user effort since their earliest days. I could give you a dozen ways they do that, but I'm going to focus just on one, and that is autocomplete tags. They introduced these things years ago. It's code that can be put into your web forms or mobile forms that will let a customer fill out that form using data they've entered before, so that with a few keystrokes or screen taps, they can fill out even a lengthy form. Even today in 2021, I find that probably half the forms I see are not properly implementing autocomplete tags. I went to register for a tech conference. There were a dozen fields in this form, a long form. Every single field populated with the word Roger because the coder had gotten lazy, taken one field from another form, simply replicated it, changed the visible part so it looked okay. If you look at the web page, it looked okay to his boss and the marketing manager. But every customer who wanted to register for that conference had to manually type in their email address, type in their company name, type in their street address. Hundreds of unnecessary wasted keystrokes because of this minor coding error. So I encourage you to find your friction. You can do that by observing your customers. Watch what they're doing either in person or remotely. You can do lab testing, but you don't have to do that. A lot of tests can be conducted very simply and cheaply over the web. If you're rolling out a change to your mobile app or to your website, you can get responses back from web panels in just a few hours to find out if real humans find it as easy and obvious as your team does. You can use tools like eye tracking, where people actually looking at it, they're looking at what you want them to look at. You can do click tracking, and I guarantee you, if you are not doing click tracking now and you implement it, you'll find that people are clicking on stuff that is not clickable. And when you find that a lot of people are clicking on something like that, and go to your web designer or your app designer and say, hey, people are clicking on this, they are likely to tell you that's because customers are stupid. They don't know what they're doing. No. If a lot of customers are clicking on something that's not clickable, it is not the customer that is stupid. It is the design that is stupid. If you've got sufficient volume, you can use things like behavioral analytics right down to the SKU level like Walmart does. And there's other behavior metrics. You can measure rage clicking. That's when people are clicking on something repeatedly because it's not doing whatever they expect it to do, and they keep clicking it rapidly to hoping that maybe it will finally work. You can even do profanity detection in your voice menus. But let me give you a pro tip. If people are cursing at your voice menus, you're doing it wrong. Whatever you do, use something. Watch that customer behavior, measure it, and be sure that you are minimizing customer effort, because friction changes behavior. And I encourage you to strive for a friction-free culture, not just with your customer experience, but with your employee experience too. I don't have time to get into that piece today, but that can be equally important to your business success. Now, I am pretty sure that I have delivered on my promise to give each of you a set of friction goggles, because once you start seeing friction, you can't stop. I have turned on your brain's reticular activating system for seeing friction. Your RAS is what lets you cross Times Square in Manhattan by filtering out all that irrelevant stuff and only letting through oncoming cars, the pedestrians right around you, and the crosswalk indicator. You've had your own RAS experience, I can guarantee. If you've ever bought a new car or a new to you car, within a week, you start seeing your car everywhere. It's like, where were all those cars? I didn't notice them before. You didn't notice them, but they were there just previously. Your RAS filtered them out. Now it's letting them through because it's thinking, oh, this might be important. Looks like my car. So I encourage you to keep activating your RAS for friction. Jot it down, do a screen grab if it's digital, take a picture if it's in real life. The more you activate your RAS, the more you will keep seeing. And you have my permission to expose bad user experience and bad customer experience, whether it's within your organization or whether you encounter it someplace else. Make the world a better place. And you have my permission to push back in your organization against those people who have important functions, legal people, compliance, accounting, security. Their jobs are all important, but they do not necessarily have customer experience in their job description as a primary function. And sometimes a higher level of authority needs to make that trade-off. You know, I joke about Amazon and not having much security. Actually, they do have security, but they have made it very nuanced. If you engage in a high-risk transaction there, like sending gift cards to people, they will re-authenticate you, but they have coded their website in a way that screens out those high-risk transactions, says, okay, we're going to put a higher level of security on these, where so many companies take the simple, easy, cheap approach of simply creating a wall. If you're inside it, you can do anything. If you're outside it, you can't do anything. So push back, if necessary, escalate. And when you encounter this guy, and you probably will encounter this guy, who says something like, high effort, nah, it's just a few clicks. That's not effort. It's a best practice. Everybody else does it. People are used to it. Doesn't matter. Tell them that one tiny little click was worth millions of dollars to both Jeff Bezos and Steve Jobs. Use that one-click story to be persuasive. Now, about this point, you might be holding up that red card saying, enough, my brain is full. So let's conclude with 3 very tiny dessert items here. One, I encourage you to use non-conscious influence techniques. We talked about a few of them. There are many, many more. Read some of the great books on the topic, not just mine, but there are other great ones. I mentioned a couple, but you can find plenty. Focus on your customer effort and your employee effort to make things easier. You will get more sales. You will have more engaged team members. And whenever you're trying to persuade people, make your slide both slippery and steep. Thank you so much. I hope we can do this in person sometime soon. But in the meantime, stay safe.
Olá, sou a Sibeli Marques, estrategista em Neuromarketing, professora titular da pós-graduação de Neuromarketing do IBN, e hoje eu estou aqui para falar para vocês sobre uma parceria da Real Y com o IBN, que é uma parceria institucional, pedagógica, para quem for aluno da pós-graduação do IBN. Vou pedir para você curtir esse evento e seguir o IBN nas redes sociais. O objetivo da aula de hoje é você entender a importância de utilizar uma ferramenta de neuromarketing, você conhecer as métricas que a gente consegue captar com uma ferramenta de neuromarketing, as possíveis aplicações e os cases. Vamos começar com a aplicação. Com uma ferramenta de neuromarketing online existem milhares de aplicações possíveis. Uma delas é o posicionamento ideal de produtos no ponto de venda. Então, como é que você pode fazer isso? Tirando uma foto de um planograma ou até simulando um planograma no Photoshop e conseguindo ver qual que é o melhor posicionamento do teu produto na gôndola. E aí você negocia, obviamente, aquele espaço para você. Sites e landing pages. Então assim, poxa, eu vou lançar um site novo, eu vou lançar uma landing page para a campanha de um produto específico. Como é que eu sei se está legal? Como é que eu sei se as pessoas estão curtindo, estão olhando para o meu banner? Por onde que as pessoas vão navegar por aquele site, por aquela landing page? Com uma ferramenta de neuromarketing online você consegue saber isso. Óbvio que a gente tem que falar também das propagandas de TV e campanhas, então serve para qualquer tipo de propaganda e de campanha. Seja para YouTube, para TV, para rede social, para o que você quiser, a gente consegue validar. Então, se você vai lançar uma campanha para TV, em vez de você investir um monte de dinheiro na produção de um filme e você investir um monte de verba para você reservar espaço na mídia, primeiro faz uma validação com um experimento de neuromarketing, validou, você vai ter o vídeo perfeito, otimizado e aí sim você lança. A ferramenta de neuromarketing ela não vale só para marketing, efetivamente. Se você vai dar uma palestra, o presidente da sua empresa vai fazer um pitch, se você vai dar um treinamento, você consegue modelar um pitch ideal de uma palestra, de um treinamento. Como? Você grava um piloto, submete ao experimento, vê quais partes as pessoas curtiram mais, quais que elas tiveram mais atenção, e aí você edita para manter sempre a atenção focada naquele seu discurso, naquele seu treinamento. Político usa muito isso. E aí eles criam o vídeo perfeito, eles criam o discurso perfeito para colocar na televisão para a gente votar neles. Bom, a ferramenta de neuromarketing não precisa ser usada só para marketing. Quando a gente fala de palestra, treinamento, aula, campanha política, tudo dá para usar. Como? A gente grava um vídeo, um piloto, a gente submete ao experimento, vê, testa qual que é o engajamento, qual que é a atenção focada em cada etapa daquele vídeo e modela. Para quê? Para que a gente tenha o vídeo perfeito. Ambientes. Então, assim, eu quero saber, um shopping center, por exemplo, que é o caso aqui desse exemplo. Onde que eu vou colocar uma sinalização no shopping? Onde que as pessoas estão olhando quando elas transitam por um corredor de um shopping center, por exemplo? Então, a gente tem como saber. Basta filmar aquele espaço daquele shopping, ou pode ser qualquer tipo de ambiente, e a gente vai saber para onde que naturalmente as pessoas concentram maior atenção, concentram maior foco. Quando a gente fala de eventos, também é possível medir. Então vamos dizer, estou com um evento num Playland. Então assim, qual que é o melhor lugar para a gente colocar de repente uma lojinha de souvenir? É à direita ou à esquerda? Onde que as pessoas têm mais atenção quando elas dão de cara com aquele evento? Então a gente consegue medir, faz um mock-up, faz o teste e a gente consegue saber onde que a gente tem que colocar cada um dos brinquedos, cada uma das lojinhas, onde que a gente vai colocar o boneco principal, onde que a gente vai colocar o personagem secundário, para atrair mais a atenção das pessoas. E eu não poderia deixar de falar de embalagens. Embalagens é muito utilizado com um experimento de neuromarketing. Por quê? Porque a embalagem, ela é que praticamente puxa os olhos do cliente num ponto de venda. Então, se a gente vai lançar um produto novo e a gente cria uma embalagem mais ou menos, ou que chama menos atenção do cliente versus nosso concorrente, provavelmente a gente vai ficar apagadinho no ponto de venda. Então, quando a gente fala de embalagem, é muito legal a gente testar a embalagem sozinha e depois testar ela aplicada num planograma para ver como é que ela se sai frente aos concorrentes. E qual que é a importância de realizar um experimento de neuromarketing? Aqui a gente tem um exemplo da companhia ferroviária de Miami. Então eles tinham feito uma sinalização, que é o que está à sua esquerda, e com a ajuda de ferramentas de neuromarketing, eles conseguiram otimizar essa comunicação para esse exemplo que está do seu lado direito. Parece besteira, mas se você olhar, você vê que a imagem está muito mais clean. E quando foi submetido ao experimento, a gente tem que pensar que o foco atencional tem que ser naquilo que a empresa quer passar de mensagem. Se eu coloco a minha principal mensagem e as pessoas olham para outra coisa, provavelmente elas não vão lembrar da minha principal mensagem, que é aquilo que eu quero efetivamente passar para os meus consumidores. Bom, agora vamos falar sobre a Real Why, que é a ferramenta parceira do IBN. A Real Why, ela tem algumas funcionalidades. Hoje eu vou falar de duas delas para vocês, que é o Eye Tracker. O Eye Tracker, ele detecta através da webcam do computador, ou celular, ou tablet, exatamente para onde que as pessoas estão direcionando o olhar. Então a gente consegue saber o que chama mais atenção, o tempo de fixação do olhar, quer dizer o quê? Quanto tempo que as pessoas ficaram olhando para determinado ponto ali da minha peça, da minha campanha, e a velocidade de reconhecimento do foco. Então, se eventualmente aquela logo que eu coloquei ali, ela chamou atenção, mas ela demorou muito para ser percebida, é melhor trocar ela de lugar. Então, quando a gente fala de métricas de eye tracker, existem algumas que são bem legais de vocês aprenderem. Então, a primeira é o tempo para a primeira fixação. Como eu falei anteriormente, não adianta ter fixação, mas demorar muito para ela ser encontrada, para aquele logo ou qualquer parte que você queira que seja exposta, que chame a atenção do seu cliente, demore muito tempo para ser fixada. A outra é o tempo médio gasto. Então, de repente é 0,01 segundo. Então a pessoa bateu o olho, ok, fixou, mas não ficou ali, não engajou, né? O número de fixações é importante, a gente tem que saber no universo de respondentes o número de fixações que aconteceram naquele ponto que a gente julga importante, tá? A proporção, quantos respondentes dentro daquele universo deixaram pelo menos uma fixação dentro daquele ponto que é importante para a gente ser observado e ter atenção. A duração média da fixação é o tempo médio que aquela fixação durou e a duração da primeira fixação. Então, quanto tempo, em média, durou aquela primeira fixação. Tá? Vocês vão ver nos exemplos práticos assim como é que funciona e o que é mais importante a gente olhar de bate-pronto num experimento. Bom, uma métrica super importante é o coeficiente de atenção, que chama coeficiente K. Por que ele é importante? Se eu não tenho atenção sustentada na minha peça ou em parte de uma campanha que eu estou fazendo, então vamos dizer assim, um vídeo para o YouTube. Se eu tenho 30 segundos para aquele vídeo e as pessoas dispensam atenção sustentada em metade dele, ou então no começo e no final e o meio simplesmente elas divagam, eu tenho que otimizar aquele pedaço onde o coeficiente K foi negativo. Então, assim, se a gente está falando do coeficiente K, que é uma métrica que vai aparecer aqui nos nossos experimentos, coeficiente K maior que 0, quer dizer que as pessoas estão prestando atenção sustentada. Se o coeficiente K for menor que 0, quer dizer que as pessoas, estão olhando, mas muitas vezes estão divagando. Acontece isso, a gente olha para um lugar, fixa o olhar, mas a cabeça está em outro planeta. Então isso super acontece. E o coeficiente K igual a 0, quer dizer que a pessoa está olhando, mas ela não está com a atenção sustentada. E como é que a gente sabe isso? Como é que a gente calcula isso? Pelo movimento ocular. Então, se a gente tem grandes amplitudes, quer dizer que a pessoa está meio que viajando. Se a gente tem amplitudes pequenininhas, quer dizer que, de olhar, quer dizer que a pessoa está com a atenção sustentada. E é isso que interessa para a gente quando a gente fala de eye tracker. Vamos falar um pouquinho de facial coding, que é muito interessante. Por quê? Porque a gente consegue captar as emoções primárias de valência positiva. Isso quer dizer o quê? Surpresa e alegria. A gente consegue captar essas duas emoções quando a gente submete uma campanha, um filme, um pitch, uma palestra ou até mesmo uma peça. A gente consegue saber o que as pessoas sentiram, curtiu. E como é que a gente sabe se a pessoa curtiu efetivamente? A gente tem surpresa e alegria aparecendo com altos níveis no nosso gráfico. E eu vou mostrar para vocês como é que funciona. A gente fez um estudo com uma peça do IBN para o evento que está acontecendo agora. Então, vamos dizer assim, qual que são as partes desse anúncio que mais chamaram a atenção das pessoas? Então, para quem nunca viu um heatmap, é onde a concentração de vermelho está mais intensa. Então, quanto mais vermelho, mais as pessoas observaram aquela parte da peça. Ok, então vamos ver as métricas. Então, eu sei que essa peça, ela teve 1.047 fixações, a peça toda. Isso é bom ou isso é ruim? Tudo depende do que a gente vai comparar. Aqui eu fiz só um estudo dessa peça específica, mas vamos dizer que o IBN tivesse duas peças e falasse assim, poxa, qual das duas é melhor para eu divulgar o meu evento? A gente faria a peça A, a peça B antes de ir para o ar e a gente saberia pelo número de fixações, o tempo gasto na fixação da logo, do nome do evento, a gente saberia qual das duas a gente colocaria no ar, qual seria melhor. E efetivamente, a gente pode saber qual que é a relevância das logos na parte de baixo do rodapé da peça. Por quê? Porque a gente pode escolher cada parte da peça, a gente pode marcar e ter um gráfico igual a esse que vocês estão vendo à direita para cada parte da peça. Então, a gente pode saber o futuro do neuromarketing. Qual que é o tempo médio de fixação, quantas fixações a gente teve versus as logos que estão embaixo, por exemplo. E a gente compara aonde que efetivamente chamou mais atenção da audiência. Se a gente quisesse saber, por exemplo, eu sou patrocinadora, a Cibele é patrocinadora do evento, e minha logo está lá em cima, onde está a logo do YouTube. Não teve muita atenção, certo? Então, assim, eu como patrocinadora, será que eu ia ficar feliz? Então, por que não colocar, se a gente roda um experimento, por que não colocar minha logo embaixo, onde a atenção está mais focada? Então, é para isso que serve esse tipo de ferramenta. E claro que a gente também tinha que testar outras coisas. Então, a gente fez um estudo do feed, de uma amostra do feed do Instagram do IBN. Para quê? Para a gente saber, no desenrolar ali do feed, o que as pessoas estavam sentindo, se as pessoas estavam gostando, elas estavam com a atenção focada, quais as peças do feed que as pessoas demandaram mais atenção, menos atenção. Então, quando a gente olha para esse gráfico, a gente vê as duas emoções primárias mapeadas, que é a alegria e surpresa. Então, quanto mais intensas elas são, mais as pessoas estão engajadas, tá? E atenção, que é o coeficiente K, é sempre essa curva laranja quando ela está positiva. Lembra que quando ela é negativa, a pessoa está meio divagando. É muito difícil que a pessoa, a audiência no geral, tenha atenção focada, sustentada o tempo inteiro. É normal que oscile bastante, tá? Então, aí depois a gente vai ver agora qual que é a comparação entre duas peças desse feed do IBN. Bom, uma das peças que a gente testou é: existe lado bom na emoção negativa? Então, a gente vai fazer uma comparação aqui. A gente teve aqui 4.279 fixações e aqui a gente pegou para o estudo, que é para mostrar para vocês como é que funciona, a peça inteira, tá? Então não foi só um pedacinho, como eu falei que dá para fazer, a gente pegou a peça inteira. Então, 4.279 fixações. Teve até um clique, tá? E uma coisa que é interessante falar aqui nessa ferramenta é que a gente consegue saber quantas palavras as pessoas efetivamente leram quando expostas à ferramenta. Então, vamos dizer assim, se eu tenho um texto, eu tenho não é o caso aqui porque é um feed de Instagram, mas eu tenho um texto e eu sei que esse texto tem 20 palavras. Quando eu exponho esse texto para a minha audiência, eu consigo saber quantas palavras as pessoas efetivamente leram. Porque muitas vezes as pessoas, quando veem um anúncio, elas leem a primeira palavra, outra palavra, de repente que está em negrito e simplesmente a mensagem não fica completa. Aqui a gente consegue saber quantas palavras as pessoas leram efetivamente. Então vamos comparar aqui duas peças do feed do IBN. Bom, aqui rapidamente, só para vocês verem quando eu falei de comparação. Então a primeira peça, por que o intestino é o considerado o segundo cérebro e como o cérebro reage? Lógico que o feed do IBN tem milhões de posts. Então, no primeiro, a gente teve 214 fixações e no segundo, 119 fixações na peça inteira. Então, vamos dizer que a gente tivesse que escolher assim, qual que a gente vai apostar um pouquinho mais? Vamos apostar no que teve maior fixação. Por quê? Se a gente teve mais fixação, quer dizer que as pessoas se engajaram mais, tiveram mais atenção no primeiro do que na segunda peça. Isso não é uma escolha de Sofia. Muitas vezes a gente tem peças melhores e peças um pouquinho piores. Mas não quer dizer que essas menos no teste AB, ela tem que ser descartada. Ela sempre pode ser otimizada. Então, quando a gente faz um teste como esse, principalmente antes da gente subir no nosso feed ou subir para uma campanha, o teste tem a finalidade sempre de otimizar a peça. Então, vamos dizer, estão fazendo uma campanha para TV. Então, a ideia é que a gente pega aqueles 30 segundos e a gente deixa ele perfeito. Sempre vai ter pontos positivos e pontos negativos. A ideia é que a gente otimize e suba sempre o vídeo perfeito. Vou fazer um case aqui de uma marca que quase ninguém conhece, que é o McDonald's. Então, vamos lá. Então, são duas peças, tá? Também de rede social, para a gente saber qual que teve maior engajamento do público. Então, vamos olhar essa primeira aqui, que é da batatinha frita. Então, para onde que as pessoas efetivamente olharam? Se a gente está falando do McDonald's, quando a gente vê a embalagem, a gente já sabe que a embalagem é do McDonald's, que é da batata do McDonald's. Mas vamos dizer que fosse da hamburgueria da Cibele. E essa logo acima, ela fosse a logo da Cibele. As pessoas olharam para a marca? Não olharam para a marca. A peça como um todo, ela teve 288 fixações. E como eu falei, e a marca? Tá, a gente está falando de uma campanha aqui do Mac. Então todo mundo olha para a embalagem e sabe que é do McDonald's, certo? Mas e se eu quisesse observar só a marca? 0 fixações, gente. Então assim, quando a gente pensa no McDonald's, como eu falei, todo mundo sabe que essa embalagem é do Mac. Mas e se fosse a minha lanchonete? Nem todo mundo trabalha no McDonald's, nem todo mundo está fazendo uma campanha no McDonald's, certo? Se fosse a minha lanchonete, eu não poderia colocar logo ali. Essa é a grande sacada de uma ferramenta de neuromarketing. Então, quando a gente pensa de marcas comuns, que não são tão conhecidas, ou que são até conhecidas e querem divulgar a marca por algum motivo, de repente um produto novo, que não é conhecido, as pessoas não relacionam o produto com a marca, a gente tem que observar. Porque se a gente coloca a marca numa posição onde ela não é vista, ela não chama atenção, as pessoas lembram do produto, lembram da categoria, às vezes compram do concorrente e não compram a nossa. Então é por isso que é muito importante a gente sempre observar o lugar que a gente quer colocar nossos elementos nas peças. E é por isso que serve o neuromarketing, é por isso que esse tipo de experimento é tão importante. E essa outra peça agora, que é uma peça de um Big Mac. Então, novamente, quando a gente olha para a peça, a gente já vê ali Big Mac escrito, a gente já sabe que é do McDonald's, mas novamente, né? A gente tinha 288 fixações na primeira, 269 aqui na segunda, então tá mais ou menos ali, mas novamente a marca. Vocês veem que a marca aqui até ela foi um pouquinho mais observada, mas ela não tá naquele heatmap vermelho, ela não tá naquela concentração de atenção que as pessoas olharam. Então, assim, de novo, se a minha marca é a marca da Cibele, a hamburgueria da Cibele, está lá em cima, ela não está sendo observada. Então, se a gente olhar só a logo do lado direito em cima, a gente, assim como no outro caso, que era o caso da batatinha, aqui a gente só teve uma fixação. Então, se eu estou falando da marca de hambúrguer da Cibele, poxa, as pessoas vão lembrar da minha marca? Aqui tudo bem, McDonald's, todo mundo conhece Big Mac, mas se fosse a minha marca, as pessoas não saberiam, não lembrariam, e aí eu ia fomentar a demanda pelo consumo de hambúrguer, mas e a minha marca? Então, quando a gente faz um estudo desse, a gente consegue otimizar, como eu venho falando, os elementos dentro da peça. Isso é super importante. E quando eu comparo as duas peças aqui, eu tenho mais ou menos a mesma performance entre elas em termos de fixação, em termos de tempo gasto. Então, assim, as duas são sensacionais. Mas, se a gente pensa o posicionamento da logo, talvez ela tivesse que estar em outro lugar. De repente, no meio ali do Big Mac, junto com o texto do Big Mac, um pouquinho mais para o meio da batatinha. Então, é para isso que serve a ferramenta de neuromarketing. Ela nunca vai te dar uma resposta certo ou errado, tudo depende do que você quer mostrar. Então, você quer que a sua logo apareça? Então, vamos fazer experimento para colocar a sua marca no lugar de destaque. Não, Cibele, eu quero que o meu produto apareça. Se for esse caso, então assim, poxa, aqui o McDonald's acertou em cheio. Então, é para isso que a gente faz esse tipo de experimento, para ver se o que a gente espera está acontecendo efetivamente na cabeça dos nossos consumidores. É isso, gente, obrigada. Escaneando o QR Code, vocês têm acesso ao meu LinkedIn, que tem todos os meus contatos.